Have you tried cold sesame noodles at Chinese takeout places? I haven't. I actually didn't even notice they exist. Hidden under the appetizer section, sometimes you find this dish. Turns out you could find cold sesame noodles all over New York City in the 1970s and 80s. The New York Times said legend has it the recipe came from a chef called Shorty Tang. In today's episode, we will try this cold sesame noodle dish at the revived original restaurant Shorty first opened in 1968 in New York Chinatown and learn a little bit about this dish. Hi, my name is Christy and this is the American Chinese Food Show. Cold noodles were first recorded in China in the Tang dynasty around the year 700. Many parts of China have noodles with sesame, but the classic cold sesame noodles probably came from the Beijing region. Not only do they have that famous fried soybean paste noodle jiajiangmian, people in Beijing and Tianjin love their noodles cold with the sesame sauce in the summer, even today. But the cold sesame noodles are basic. Noodles, sesame paste, a bit of chili oil. You eat it with cucumber, either shredded or holding the whole thing in your other hand. Pretty far from the peanut butter American cold sesame noodles. So what happened? Cue 1960s, the dawn of a golden age to most Americans. New York City. Being the front and center of the country, was getting tired of Cantonese cuisine, which was already around for almost 100 years then. New Yorkers had experienced the so-called Mandarin cuisine for a decade, brought over by wealthy folks and the chefs who left China after the 1949 Chinese Revolution. But they were craving something new again. And here came Sichuanese food, along with it, the American cold sesame noodles. Many of you probably know that there is a famous sesame noodle dish called dan dan noodles in Sichuanese cuisine. The story goes in 1841, a guy named Chen Baobao in the Jigong city in the Sichuan province thought of selling noodles when he saw people selling snacks with a carrying pole. Dan literally means that shoulder pole. Chen Baobao created the dan dan noodles with a few distinct ingredients: lard, vinegar, and pickled budding leaves of Chinese mustard greens. As Chen Baobao dan dan noodles became more popular and spread to other cities in Sichuan like Chengdu and Chongqing, we saw more variations like with minced pork, chili bean paste, chili oil made with rapeseed oil and peppercorn, fried crushed peanuts and sesame seeds. Still, no peanut butter. This is where we don't know what really happened. We know dan dan noodles made it to Hong Kong and was adopted for the local taste. A cook that used to work at the imperial court in the Qing dynasty opened a Sichuanese restaurant in Hong Kong in 1947. He created this version of dan dan noodles that uses only a little chili oil because Cantonese people can't really eat spicy food, but with more sesame paste along with crushed peanuts and chopped up pickled mustard greens root. And in Taiwan, we start to see a localized version of the Beijing-style cold sesame noodles popping up, made with Taiwanese chewy wheat noodles. But no one was using peanut butter. So let's go back to the 1960s in New York. Shorty Tang was a chef. The New York Magazine called him legendary and that he was reputed to be the culinary teacher of almost every Sichuan chef in town. Tang first emigrated from Sichuan to Taipei during the Chinese Civil War. He worked in Taiwan for over a decade, running his own restaurant. Then he eventually landed in New York in 1963. He worked for David K at the restaurant Sichuan for a while. David K was largely considered to be the restaurateur who introduced authentic Sichuan cuisine to New York. Then it spread across the whole country, or at least the interpretation of it. That's how we now see that little, that red pepper icon next to a dish's name in a Chinese takeout menu. We will cover him in a different episode later. The New York Times in David K's obituary said K helped make cold noodles with sesame sauce almost as much a symbol of the city as pastrami and bagels. Wow. But he was not a cook. It was Shorty Tang, that local law believes, who first brought the cold sesame noodles to the American shores. Shorty eventually opened his own place, Hwa Yuan Sichuan Inn in Chinatown. At its peak, Hwa Yuan reportedly went through 500 pounds of noodles a day. Food editor Sam Sifton at the New York Times tried to recreate 15 years ago the recipe for the original Hwa Yuan's cold sesame noodles from his memory. He claims it was Shorty's recipe that many New Yorkers remember today. He did ask Ed Schoenfeld, David Cade's partner, for help. Ed apparently said, "It's all about the Skippy, baby." The recipe includes Chinese egg noodles, sesame oil, soy sauce, rice vinegar, 2 parts sesame paste, 1 part peanut butter, sugar, grated ginger, garlic, chili garlic paste, and roasted peanuts. All the ingredients are pretty standard. The question to ask is, who first started adding peanut butter in this dish? Peanut butter was going pretty mainstream in Hong Kong starting in the 50s. Here's an ad for a South African brand, Yum Yum. Skippy was imported in the 60s, but as far as I know, peanut butter was used only for Hong Kong cafe Hwa Yuan style food like toast, French toast, waffles, along with butter and condensed milk. Peanut butter also made it to Taiwan through the post-war US's aid starting in 1951. It's entirely possible the recipe with peanut butter came from Hong Kong or Taiwan, like some people suggest, but my money's actually on Shorty. Because I feel like peanut butter must be in abundance to begin with for someone to say, "Hey, let's add it to noodles." Folks in Hong Kong and Taiwan were still learning about peanut butter in the 60s. In their mind, it's still a very Western food. But I could see Shorty and David Cage just kind of sitting together, brainstorming what they could do to make something addictive for the American palate. The original Hwa Yuan closed in 1992. Shorty's son, Shorty Tang, also a chef who learned how to cook from his father back in Taiwan, opened the new Hwa Yuan next door to where the original restaurant was in 2017. How much does Shorty's son follow his father's recipe? Let's see. I ordered the cold sesame noodles. The noodles came refreshingly cold in the hot New York summer. The emulsified sauce was creamy, blended with the perfectly cooked noodles. Shorty's son Jerry did say that food editor Sam Sifton knew every detail of the dish and knew what was in it and not in it. Yet, I found ingredients not listed in the New York Times recipe: peppercorn powder and pickled mustard greens root, and I like them. The peppercorn powder added just a slight hint of numbness distinctly found in Sichuanese cuisine. It's important because the amount of chili oil used is so small in this dish. Without it, it would be lacking some kicks. And we know the original version wouldn't have it because Sichuan peppercorns were banned by the FDA until 2005. The chopped pickled mustard greens root is also an interesting choice because if you remember, Sichuanese dandan noodles use pickled mustard greens leaves. The Hong Kong version uses mustard greens root. Big difference here. This noodle dish therefore actually feels very familiar to my Cantonese palate. I clearly had never tried Shorty's version. Maybe this is what he used to make, or maybe Shorty's son decided to elevate the cold sesame noodles with some updated touches. Sichuanese food has become even more popular in the United States as more mainland folks come for study or work. The quote-unquote authentic kind that burns your lips, your tongue, and throat. You can easily find them in like Flushing or even prime locations like East Village in New York. Back when Mimi Sheraton, food critic for the New York Times in the 1970s, gave Hwa Yuan 2 stars, she thought Hwa Yuan provided true Sichuan specialties and offered a fascinating array of unusual dishes. 50 years later, for me, Hwa Yuan represents almost like a time capsule of Sichuanese food found in its early years in America. Just like how owner and chef Shorty Tang said, "I'm going to remake history here. Sesame noodles, fine scallion pancakes, Sichuan kung pao chicken done simply, the way it's supposed to be, just with chilies and garlic." I enjoyed my meal, and if you want to try some old school American Sichuanese food, try out Hwa Yuan next time you're in New York. That's it for today's episode. If you like our content, subscribe to our channel. See you soon.